Here, and right now we're going to be doing Unit 4 notes for Part 2. So we're going to be looking over the second part of that note sheet. So first of all, we need to talk about perfect square trinomials. So for perfect square trinomials, sometimes when you factor, the factors end up being the same. So you have two parentheses that are the same. And when they're identical like that, you can write them as one term squared. So for example, x minus 4 times x minus 4 can become x minus 4 and all of that squared. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at practicing factoring some of that. So I'm going to set up the x on number 7. So for that, remember you want to multiply your first and your last. So we're multiplying to 144 and adding to 24. So we need to think about what multiplies to 144 and adds to a negative 24. So both signs need to be negative to multiply to a positive product. So I'm going to have negative 12 and negative 12. So now I'm going to use that to split up that middle term. So I have n squared. Now instead of writing 24n, I'm going to have minus 12n plus 144. And now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So let's go ahead and let's make our groups. So doing that, so between n squared and 12n, I could take out an n. So I'm going to go ahead and divide each term by n. So n squared divided by n is n. And negative 12n divided by n is just going to give me negative 12. Now I see that my negative in the center here, so that means I need to take a negative greatest common factor out. So between negative 12 and 144, I could take out a negative 12. So I'm going to divide each of these terms by a negative 12. Well, negative 12 divided by negative 12 is just n, and 144 divided by negative 12 is negative 12. So when I go ahead and write out my terms, I see I have n minus 12, and in the second parenthesis, n minus 12. So I have the same two parentheses written twice. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write them as one parenthesis squared. So that's my final answer for number 7. Next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 8. So for number 8, when I'm setting up my x, I need to make sure that I multiply 9 times 4. So that's going to give me 36 on the top of my x. And then down below is negative 12. So I need to figure out what multiplies to 36 and adds to negative 12. Well, that's going to be negative 6 and negative 6. So again, I'm going to use that to split up my 12y. So I have 9y squared, and instead of writing 12y, I'm going to write it as negative 6y and negative 6y. Notice that that will still add to negative 12y. And then I'm going to add 4. So now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and make my two groups. Between 9 and 6, I can take out a 3 and a y. So I'm going to divide each of these by 3 and y. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Y squared divided by y is y. Then negative 6 divided by 3 is 2, and y over y cancels out. So now I see that I have a negative in the middle there, so I need to take out a negative GCF. Between negative 6 and 4, I can take out a negative 2. So then I'm divided that by negative 2. And then I get 3y, and 4 minus divided by negative 2 is negative 2. So then I have 3y minus 2 as one parenthesis, and then 3y minus 2 in the other. So now I can go ahead and write that as one parenthesis quantity squared. So that's my final answer for number 8. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 9. So first of all, what I noticed from number 9 is that 18, 48, and 32 are all divisible by 2. So I'm going to start this off by taking out a greatest common factor of 2. And it doesn't change the value of the problem, but it does make it slightly easier for me to factor. So now when I set up my x, I'm only going to be focusing on this part. I'm going to worry about my greatest common factor at the end of the problem. So now I'm going to do 9 times 16, and that's going to give me 144. And then I'm adding to a negative 24. So I need to figure out what multiplies to 144 and adds to negative 24. So that's going to be negative 12 and negative 12. So now what I need to do is split up that middle term. So I want to keep the first and the last term the same, and I'm just going to be splitting up that term there. So I have 9y squared, and instead of 24y, I have minus 12y plus 16. And now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and make my groups. Between 9 and 12, I can take out a 3, and I can also take out a y. So I'm dividing each of these by 3y. And when I do that, I get 3y here, and minus negative 12 divided by 3 is 4, and y over y will cancel out. So here I have a negative 12, so I know my greatest common factor is going to be negative. Between 12 and 16, I can take out a 4. So I'm going to divide each of these terms by a negative 4. Negative 12 divided by negative 4 is 3, and then I have y. 16 divided by a negative 4 is a negative 4. So I notice that my leftovers are matching here, so I can write those out, and then I'm going to write what's left after that. Now again, since I have the same parentheses set next to each other, I can write that as the 1 parenthesis squared. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 10. So for number 10, I can take out a greatest common factor of 2. So I'm going to start that out at the beginning. Oh, and I forgot over here, I have my greatest common factor. I forgot to write it at my final answer. Don't forget your little sister. She will be sad. So you're taking out a 2, and you have 25g squared plus 20g plus 4. And now I'm ready to set up the x, and I'm just going to use that little guy right there. So I'm going to do 25 times 4, which is 100, and then I'm adding to 20. So to do that, I need to use 10 and 10. So now I'm going to set it up for grouping, and I'm just going to use that guy right there. So my first term stays the same. I'm splitting up my middle term as 10g and 10g. So I'm splitting those two up as if they were 20g, and then I have plus 4. So now what I need to do is factor by grouping. So I'm going to make my two groups. Between 20 and 10, I can take out a 5 and a g. So I'm dividing each of these by 5g. So then I get 5g when I take 25g squared divided by 5g. And then 10 divided by 5 is 2, and g over g is going to cancel out. And then we're going to take out the 2 out of the second group, so I can divide both those by 2, and I get 5g plus 2. So here I notice that my leftovers match, so I can go ahead and take those out. And then once I've taken those out, I can write what's on the outside, which is 5g plus 2. Again, I have the same parenthesis twice, so I can write it as 1 parenthesis squared. And that's my final answer. So that concludes your second part of your note video. Thanks for listening.